Hello, my name is Matthew Clifford, a behavior analyst at Pathway Strategic Teaching Center, and today I'm going to be conducting a training on data collection. So what is data collection? It's the process of recording information regarding observable behaviors. And we want to look at those observable behaviors as things that we can see in the environment in real time. Why do we collect data? This allows behavior analysts to see what is working in treatment and to assess which types of intervention methods best work for the client. While we're collecting data, if we were to see a decrease when we started intervention, we can probably surmise that part of our intervention or our intervention is effective for that behavior and decreasing it. If we were dealing with a challenging behavior and we saw an increase, at that point in time, we can assume that we may need to change some part of our treatment package to make it more effective for that particular behavior. It also helps with identifying the factor that may be influencing the problem behavior. So we could look at if there was an increase in the time of day, when certain demands were placed on the student. When we're collecting data, we can see that based on data analysis. Who may provide them and who do we give them to? Behavior analysts, teachers, lead behavior technicians, so anyone that you communicate with on that day-to-day basis during distance learning. Operational definitions. In order to collect data, it is critical to understand the operational definition of the behavior of interest. Operational definitions may include examples or non-examples. What we really want is a good definition where if someone came in who did not know the student would be able to track the data for that particular behavior. We have some examples here. So for spitting, any instance that Jenny projects saliva from her mouth towards an individual immediately following a demand or denied access to an item, activity, or location. So in this instance, we would track spitting if we gave Jenny that demand and she was spitting at somebody, whereas we may not track the data where she goes over to a trash can or a sink and spits into that receptacle. We also have an example for compliance. So any instance that Johnny appropriately responds to instruction within 10 seconds with no more than one visual or verbal prompt. Johnny should be following school expectations and or using coping strategies. Again, very clear. We would want to have some type of a timing mechanism or be able to count for that 10 seconds. We know that we're only looking for one visual or verbal prompt to be able to track that data. What type of data may we collect? First, we'll look at frequency. This is the number of times that the behavior occurs. This is an example of Johnny engaging in 20 instances of aggression. This can be as simple as just taking ticks on a sheet, so like tallies on a sheet of paper, or if you were to have some type of a clicking mechanism to keep track of the exact instances that you're seeing. Duration, this is the length of time a behavior occurred. So this example, Johnny flopped for 20 minutes during an APE lesson. This is a good example of why we would take duration data. Maybe Johnny only flopped 3 times throughout the day, but was flopped for an hour of the day. Frequency may not give us the best information, whereas duration for that behavior will give us better information overall. Next is time sampling. So we have whole interval recording, partial interval recording, and momentary time sampling. With whole interval recording, you're going to indicate whether that behavior occurred during the entire interval, whether it's a 2-minute interval, 3-minute, 4-minute, 5-minute interval. Partial interval recording, you're going to indicate whether the behavior occurred at any point in time during the predetermined interval. And then finally, momentary time sampling indicate whether the behavior occurred at the end of the interval. It would be very beneficial to have some type of a timing mechanism that may buzz or signal the end of that interval, so that way you could look up, and if that behavior is happening, you would keep track whether it is happening. With these time sampling data samples, there's going to be an estimation there. Some will overestimate, some will underestimate, but it may be the clearest picture, especially if the behavior does not have a clear beginning and a clear end, so much as like an aggression. So you might use this in terms of like a tantruming behavior. So it's pretty tough to say it started, it ended, that's one. We would just use this discontinuous measurement. Next, we're going to go over some examples of what the interval data sheets may look like. So whole interval data recording sheet, if you're going to circle C if compliance occurred for the entire 5-minute period. If compliance did not occur at all, you would put an X through the C. And if data was not recorded or the student was not observed, you're going to cross out the interval. You don't want to just cross out the C because that would be looked at as if compliance did not occur. So we would want to cross out the entire interval so that didn't skew the data at all. But if we saw that Johnny, let's say from 8:30 to 8:35 was complying that whole time, we'd circle the C. Between 8:35 and 8:40, the entire time he was non-compliant, we would just put an X through the C to be able to track that data. Next is a partial interval recording data sheet example. So we'll use this data sheet to record whether or not the target behavior occurred for each 2-minute interval. For each interval, you'll circle yes if the target behavior occurred at any time during the interval, and you'll circle no if the target behavior did not occur. So between 9 o'clock and 9:02, if this was for, let's say, tantruming behavior, you didn't see it, you would circle no. Between 9:02 and 9:04, let's say at 9:02 and 40 seconds, you saw a quick little burst of a tantrum, you would circle yes, you saw it in that time period, so you would signal that you saw that particular behavior. Finally, we have momentary time sampling data sheet example. And again, this data sheet, it's looking at 10-minute intervals. So on 11:11, at the end of the 10 minutes in the first interval, that behavior was not seen. The second interval, again, at the end was not seen. Finally, in the third interval, at the end of the 10 minutes, that 10-minute mark, the data collector would have looked up and seen the behavior that we are looking at, which is a physical aggression. And you can see in this data sheet, there's 3 days here that you can track and compare each day, whether there was increases, decreases, and that's how we'd be able to track our data trends. Finally, just a note on some measurement tools that can be beneficial. Writing utensils, with data sheets. So, pencils, pens, any type of writing utensil that you can document, especially, for frequency data, you'd be able to just take those quick ticks on the sheet. You can also keep track of the total number if you're using like a clicker. So that would just be a numeric device. Each time you click, the number would go up. So this would be very beneficial for a student who maybe engages in high frequency of behavior that you're tracking. Stopwatch or a clock or a regular watch. This could be very beneficial, especially for duration data, especially if you're moving around a lot with the student or child. You may not have a clock outside. So if that student were to flop on the floor, you would be able to track that with the stopwatch or the clock. And finally, a motivator, which is just basically a time device. It will give a vibrating signal, so it's really not too clear to the student that this time is continuously being tracked, and you may use this a lot for the discontinuous measurement. So you would know that a certain interval has stopped and it's time to record that data. That concludes the data collection training. Thank you for your time, and I hope all is well. Thank you.